We're going to install some piston rings now, and we've got some lovely shiny new piston rings here in a box. If you've ordered a set of piston rings, for us, these are in nice, trendy, very designer, color-coded bags, which tell us which ring is which. So this is the top ring, this is the second ring, and this is the oil control ring. So that's easy for us. Now, however, if your rings have arrived jumbled up in a mess, it's fairly easy to tell the difference between them. The top ring will usually be the one that has a coating on it. You might find that also there'll be an information sheet in the box that will tell you what style the rings are, but the top ring generally may have a coating on it and will be plain. The second ring will have probably not a coating, or certainly if there's one without a coating, it's more likely to be the second ring, but it will also likely have a step on the ring. So you can see, if we can get in very, very close here, you can see that there's a kind of ridged or a recessed area on this second ring. So that's going to tell you that that's the second ring. And then for the oil control ring, it's clear what the spacer is, and the two rings, the two rails, don't have any particular order. So just two rails, any two, that's that. So you can easily sort out piston rings if they arrive jumbled. Just take note that piston rings have a top and a bottom. So for us, these are labelled with a T. You'll find sometimes they'll be labelled with a dot or with the word top. Before we install these piston rings, we're going to check the end gap. That is the gap between the two ends of the piston ring when the ring is installed inside the cylinder. And for us, this one wants to be between 6 and 11,000th of an inch. We're going to measure the end gap for this piston ring now. We do that by installing the ring just temporarily into the cylinder. What I'll do is just spray some WD-40 on the cylinder wall to lubricate things. Now, you want to measure the end gap for the correct cylinder. So this is going into cylinder number 3. And so we just need to make sure we're using matching pieces. What we'll do is just put that in there like so, rotate that around, and we want to get it square inside the bore here. So what you're doing with a feeler gauge is you're just feeling for what size of feeler gauge fits into the gap that you're measuring. And for us, it's 10,000ths of an inch. Anything more than that, we go up to 11,000ths, it doesn't fit in. You don't need to force it in, you'll get a feel for this, but once it feels snug, you'll know that that is the appropriate size. You should be able to feel the surfaces either side of the gap that you're measuring. So we know our piston ring gap here is 10,000ths of an inch. Once we've gapped our piston rings, so we'll check every one of these rings, and then once they're gapped and we're happy that the gaps are correct, we'll install these onto the piston. We've got our set of piston rings, we know the gaps are good. So what I'll do before I install these is I'll just lubricate the piston with some assembly lube, just to lubricate these grooves and the top. Now you can install piston rings using a tool, a piston ring expander, but for me I just install them by hand, which is a fairly simple process. But what you want to watch for is that we're not scratching the surface of the piston. So we'll start with the expander ring. And really this wants a little coating of oil as well, so we just give this a little brush. What we want is for these rings to run freely inside the grooves. As the engine runs, these rings will rotate around. That's good. All I'll do is just spiral this over the piston. Hold on a moment. And we just want to watch at the ends. Don't scratch the piston. So that's the spacer installed. Now we take this first rail, install that underneath, bring this down. With these two compression rings, we need to look for this T mark, this top mark, or a dot to tell us that we're installing this the correct way up. So top faces up on the piston. So just by hand, I just spread these open slightly, bring that down. That's one. And we just spiral this around, holding onto this end. That's the second ring installed. Now we lubricate the top one, T-mark upwards. What happens with this assembly lube is it dissolves immediately when the engine oil makes its way around the system. And once we run this engine, we will flush the oil. So, T-mark up, and once again, we just pull on these ends. Oops, total failure. Lubricant everywhere. That's one installed, and we bring this other one down. And there we go. What we're going to do here is we're going to clock these piston rings, which is to arrange the gaps so that they're not directly below each other. And you may find in the workshop manual there's specifications for this, but we can just do this roughly by eye. So the top ring, we want, if we look at the piston here, we say this is 12 o'clock. Let's put this top ring at, well, for me, this is 1 o'clock. I'm not good at telling the time, I have to be honest here. So let's put this one at 1 o'clock, and let's put the second ring gap at 11 o'clock, and the oil ring, we just make sure, let's put that on the opposite side and ensure that our rails are spaced nicely, and that looks good to me. So we have one gap here, one gap here, one gap there, and another there. And these rings do rotate inside the engine, so we're really just looking to set this up initially, and then the engine can work its magic.